Hey guys, so the chapter 21 and chapter 22 PowerPoints are combined. They're all about plants, plant form, plant function, plant, all kinds of stuff. So we're gonna get started today talking about chapter 21. Koopy, can you stop doing that? I'm trying to record a lecture. That would be great. So we're going to do chapter 21. It's only about 25 slides. So we're going to do that in one lecture, and then there will be 2 lectures for chapter 22. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. All right, guys. So chapter 21, plant form and function. We are only, all right, plant form and function, it can get super complicated. So you know that I'm a botanist and I love plants. However, like how much of like the really nitty gritty stuff is gonna like help you in life? Nah, like you need to know how things work and like base level stuff about how plants grow. But other than that, like why would you need to know the ins and outs of photosynthesis? You just don't need to. You don't go through photosynthesis. So we are only focusing on sections 1, 2, and 5 for chapter 21. Excuse if you can hear that, the dog in the background, he's chewing on a bone. I'm just gonna let him be. All right, guys, so selective forces have sculpted plant bodies into a tremendous diversity of forms. So if we look at something like a cactus or something like, what is this one? Oh, a Venus flytrap. Okay, this is a, like how they can put up these sort of beautiful and striking flower stalks, okay, for the Venus flytrap. And then below, you can actually see the like leaf part that is actually able to close in around an insect. So if we look at something like a Venus flytrap versus something like a cactus, what has sculpted them to have these forms? Like why? Okay, well, so first of all, for a Venus flytrap, what do you know about a Venus flytrap? That they trap other organisms, that they trap insects and things like that. Well, why do they need to do that? They need to do that because they don't have another mechanism of getting nitrogen from the soils that they're usually found in. Okay, so them being carnivorous plants, literally eating insects and letting them decay in these leaf like teeth, basically. It's a way of directly getting these macro and micronutrients that they need to survive that they wouldn't otherwise get from their environment. And then something like a cactus, why does it have these spines? Well, these spines are actually reduced leaves, okay? So they were once leaves, they have been reduced to minimize water loss, because where do you find most of your cacti? You find cacti in places with very little water. Okay, so you have to minimize water loss. It's great. And also it's going to protect them from, so this plant body of a cactus, it holds a ton of water actually inside of it, because these plants, they're perfectly suited for not knowing how long it's going to be until they're actually going to be able to have water again. So they store it in these plant bodies. And what a lot of animals will try to do is break open these cacti for water and for other nutrients. But these spines, these reduced and modified leaves protect them. Okay, he's coming to say hi. Hi, thanks. All right, so we're going to talk about your vegetative plant parts, and these are anything that is not like a reproductive part of the plant. Okay, so you have vegetative parts and you have reproductive parts. So for instance, a leaf is not going to help the plant reproduce. A stem is not going to help the plant reproduce. A root not helping the plant reproduce, versus something like a fruit that is the reproductive body of the plant. A flower, that's a reproductive organ. Okay, so when we talk about vegetative plant parts, we're talking about stems, leaves, and roots. And vegetables, if you think about vegetables in your diet, those are going to include one or more vegetative parts from a plant. So if you're thinking about spinach, what vegetative plant part is it? Could be leaves. If you're thinking about celery, what vegetative plant part are you eating? The stem. If you're thinking about a potato, is that a fruit or a vegetable? It's technically a vegetable. It's not a very good one, but that is actually a modified root. It's called a tuber. And so if you have a sweet potato or a russet potato, any kind of potato, it's an underground storage, like a vessel. So it'll put all of its starches into the potato to store it for later when it would need those sugars. But that's a vegetative plant part. Do you hear Gabe? You're so annoying. All right, the shoot is the above ground part of the plant. So anything you see right here, shoot system is your stem, all of your leaves, your above ground meristems that we will talk about, as well as your flower structures, your fruits and things like that. So here's your flower, here's your fruit. Shoot is the above ground part of the plant. Now your below ground part of the plant is going to have your root system. Some of the sugar produced in the shoot system, so up here, is going to travel down to the roots through this stem. So if you, first of all, how is sugar produced in the shoot? How is sugar produced in the shoot? Via photosynthesis, okay, the chlorophyll in these leaves, and sometimes also in the stems. But so if you need you need to be quiet. You need to be quiet. Oh shit, I didn't stop it. What the fuck, Eden? Guys, I had to go get a Kleenex. I thought I stopped recording for a second. Yeah, I didn't. So sorry. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, you weren't like supposed to be able to, yeah, so sorry. Oh, I see. Pause share. Okay. All right. I clicked stop share. Guys, I had to get a Kleenex. My nose was running, and to tell the dogs to be quiet. All right, guys, how is sugar produced in the shoot? Well, sugar is produced in the shoot via the chlorophyll in these leaves, and you're going to go through photosynthesis. Those leaves are going to store the sugar, but also are going to send that sugar down through the stem, via the stem, to the root system, because the root system needs sugars also, okay? Roots are going to anchor the plant, absorb water and minerals that move via the stem to the leaves. So you have this sort of like movement back and forth, where sugars are moving from the leaves down to the roots, and water and minerals are moving from the roots up to the stem and the leaves. So leaves attached to stems at the nodes. Here's a node. So everywhere that you have a leaf, it's not everywhere on that stem, okay? Just everywhere you have a leaf, they're called a node. And then you're gonna have a space between every leaf that's called your internode, okay? So leaves attached to the stems at nodes, spaces between these nodes are called internodes. And at every node, you can see it here, okay? So you have a leaf here, that's your node, and then you have a space of stem between this leaf and the next leaf, that's gonna be called your internode, okay? So here's a node, internode, node, internode, node, internode, node, internode. Now, at every node, you not only have a leaf, but you also have what's called an axillary bud. Okay, so an axillary bud is like right here. And the axillary bud is going, oh, and actually you can see it. Yeah, axillary bud I have like this screen thing that was blocking it. Here is an axillary bud. Here's an axillary bud. Here it is too. It can become another stem. It can become another leaf. It can become a flower. It can become all sorts of those things. A new branch. That's what I meant by stem. So a new branch, sort of like how this one, at this node, you didn't just have a leaf. You actually had this stem with many leaves on them. So those are what those axillary buds are. And we'll talk about this in just a little bit when we get to meristems, but what's important about these axillary buds is that they actually have pools of stem cells in them that at any point will allow this bud to start differentiating, to start growing, making any cell type. All right, so biologists divide plants into two categories based on the characteristics of their stems. You can have an herbaceous plant with this soft green stem. Okay, so soft green stems is an herbaceous plant versus a woody plant like a tree. It's made of tough bark covered wood. Now, if you think about some of the herbaceous plants that you know of, like last time, I wish that we were in person for this because there are huge like exceptions to this. This is such a weird definition of how to separate plants because it's just like not right. So for instance, if you're thinking about an herbaceous plant, think about an herb like rosemary, okay? The literal, like on Wikipedia, okay, it has the genus species of rosemary, commonly known as rosemary, is a woody perennial herb with fragrant evergreen needle-like leaves and white, pink, purple, or blue flowers native to the Mediterranean region. Okay, cool. But this is awkward because if you look up what a fucking herb is, okay, it says right here, a perennial herb. Okay, any plant with blah, 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 used for food, flavoring, medicine, or perfume. That's great. That's what we know of an herb as. But a botanical definition of an herb is any seed-bearing plant which does not have a woody stem and dies down to the ground after flowering. No, it literally has a woody stem, like right here. It's wood. So this is awkward because words are hard. In the same sentence, it says a woody perennial herb. So it's this is a horrible way to divide plants, as you can see. And there are plenty of examples like that. So guys, plants require 16 essential elements. Now, the essential elements that they need, they cannot make themselves. So they have to get them from their external environment. They have to either make them in processes like photosynthesis as byproducts, or they will take them up from their environment in the soil, through the root systems. So all plants require these 16 essential elements to stay healthy. In these plants, you can see some nutrient deficiencies. Here is an iron deficiency where basically you can just see all of the vasculature in here, and it's sort of lighter green around wherever you don't have a vein, and that's because it leads to this chlorophyll imbalance. Then over here, you've got a phosphorus nutrient deficiency that's also going to make, well, it's got these like purple sort of edges, and that's because of this phosphorus deficiency. So what you'll see is that both iron and phosphorus are micronutrients. And so even though they're only needed in very, very, very small amounts, the plant still needs them in order to function properly. Okay. So guys, your essential elements are required for metabolism, growth, and reproduction. What's pretty amazing is that, well, so you have these macronutrients and then these micronutrients down here. And if you zapped all of the water out of this plant, just so that you had the dry weight of the plant. You can look here, okay? Carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen make up 96% of the dry weight of a plant. This is huge. Okay, these elements are so important to the overall plant in different forms too, obviously. So form taken up by plants, you've got carbon dioxide, water, and different types, forms of oxygen. Okay, so for instance, oxygen is also in obviously water, which you found right here, also in carbon dioxide, but we also need that oxygen gas. So huge part of the dry weights of plants. You not only have those 3 most abundant macronutrients, which are carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, but you have other macronutrients as well. So I would say if you, I'm not going to ask you to know all of them, but if you knew like 5 of the macronutrients and like 2 of the micronutrients, you would be good to go. Okay, if you knew 5 of the macronutrients and 2 of the micronutrients, you would be good to go. Micronutrients are just required in very small amounts. Okay, so percent dry weight, not even like 0.1%. It's 0.01% of the dry weight of a plant. So you've got chlorine, iron, boron, zinc, manganese, copper, molybdenum. I don't know what it is. But even though they're only included in extremely small amounts, all of these micronutrients, the plant could not function without them. Okay. So leaves and roots absorb nutrients from the air and from the soil. Now, okay, so we talked about macronutrients and micronutrients. Sometimes though, plants absorb nutrients in a way that they cannot use, okay? And so where that becomes important are things like nitrogen fixing bacteria. Okay, and this goes with why farmers, you'll see it sometimes, like I see it out here in Batesville all the time. So instead of just growing corn every year, okay, farmers will sort of, what do they call it? Like rotate their crops, okay? So you'll have corn and cotton and corn and cotton, or corn and soybean and corn and soybean, things like that. Because cotton and because soybeans, they have these nitrogen fixing bacteria, which will take up nitrogen gas from the soil. And inside of these root hairs, there are these nitrogen fixing bacteria right over here. And those nitrogen fixing bacteria will convert that nitrogen gas that the plant cannot use into ammonium, and which is a form of nitrogen that the plant can actually use. And what's amazing is that, so once you like harvest the cotton, or once you harvest the actual soybeans, what farmers will do is that they'll plow under these plants. Okay, so now instead of having a shit ton of nitrogen gas, you've got a bunch of this nitrogen in a form right here, in a form that other plants can actually use. That is super important, because if you just constantly planted corn, you would be zapping all the nutrients from the soil, and the corn would not continue to grow. Okay, it would get smaller and smaller and smaller, and lower harvest and lower harvest and lower harvest every single year. So carnivorous plants don't have a problem with this because they obtain nitrogen and phosphorus from their prey. And nitrogen and phosphorus, okay, let's look here. Nitrogen is right here, it's a macronutrient, and so is phosphorus. Now, it's one of the like less needed micronutrients, okay? It's a very small percentage of the plant's dry weight, but still phosphorus and nitrogen, they're both macronutrients. Okay, so now we're going to talk about growth patterns for plants. You have indeterminate and then determinate growth. So things like ivy and things like kudzu, things that don't stop growing. So for instance, if the environment is good, if they have enough resources, they would just keep growing forever, like ivy and like kudzu. Those plants have indeterminate growth, okay? And then you have plants with determinate growth, like dandelions, like corn, like trees like this. Trees, okay, think of an oak tree. Would it just grow forever? No, it would grow maybe new branches and things like that, but you're not growing from the top forever. You're just not, okay? Which is how kudzu and how ivy are actually growing. So determinate growth is when you have this plant coming to an end. It physically cannot grow bigger than a certain size, okay? Versus indeterminate growth, they're never going to stop growing if there are enough resources. Kudzu, you see all over the South. Oh my gosh. Listen, when we moved to Mississippi, I was stunned by the amount of kudzu that's in Oxford. I mean, it's incredible in a bad way. So kudzu was brought over from Asia to, I think, Pennsylvania for erosion control. So we actually brought it over on purpose, and it did help with erosion. It helped with erosion too fucking well because it is a hugely invasive species. It literally will overtake trees, telephone poles, electricity lines, and anything at all. It literally will just cover everything until everything under it is dead, and then it will move on. You see these trees back here, they're not covered. It looks like they're not covered in kudzu. Well, eventually they will be. And there's nothing you can, like, kudzu is super resistant to a lot of different herbicides, okay? So a huge way to get rid of kudzu is actually by burning it. But of course, you're not actually able to do that everywhere. So plants grow, the way that plants grow, whether you are determinate or indeterminate, they add units or modules, these repeating nodes and internodes. So you have a node of a leaf, an internode, and then another node with a leaf. An internode, a node with a leaf. And this growth is going to occur at meristems, which are regions of active cell division. So you have lots of different meristems. We talked about your axillary buds. Your axillary buds right here, they have stem cells. Okay, so meristems contain plant stem cells. Also, you have a shoot apical meristem at the very top that has these pools of plant stem cells that are going to be able to divide into many different types of cell types. So, like I said, up here you've got your shoot apical meristems. Down here you have your root apical meristems. So apical means the top of the plant or the bottom of the plant, depending on if it's the shoot apical meristem or the root apical meristem. But the same thing is going to happen with the root apical meristem that happens at the shoot apical meristem. It's going to cause these roots to grow out, to grow down, to just keep growing as far as they can. Primary growth occurs at the apical meristems, the shoot apical or the root apical meristem. New cells can differentiate into any tissue type. So you can see, you can't see the root apical meristem as well, but these are areas of active cell division, and then it has this sort of cap that protects it. So similarly here, if you have this apical meristem and say that like you have a bush outside and it keeps getting like taller and you want it to get bigger, well, what you do is you chop off the top of this plant, because what will happen is that we'll still have its axillary meristems, it just won't have this shoot apical meristem. So it will grow out, it just won't grow up any longer because you have taken out that pool of stem cells. Secondary growth is going to thicken this stem. So over the years, over the season, whatever it is, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's from these lateral meristems. That secondary growth is going to occur in woody plants. And that's how you see like those rings on the trees, which we're actually going to talk about right here. The rings on the trees arise from alternating wet and dry seasons. So when you have your wet and dry seasons, you're going to have these really large cells and then these really small cells, okay? So early wood has these really big, gigantic, healthy cells. That's from the spring. And then these darker layers is the late wood, and that's from every summer. It's growing less in the summer. Some plants, okay, this is different for different types of plants, right? That like different growing seasons. But in general, you're gonna have a growing season, and then you're gonna have a season where it's like alive, it's doing well, it's just not doing much growth, and that's this little band, okay? And going from this large, like spacer area to this little darker band, that's the span of 1 year. So when you are looking at the lines, the actual physical lines are that late wood, and the spaces between the late wood is that spring wood. Okay, so wood that forms in the spring has larger cells than wood that forms in the summer. All right, guys, that was all for chapter 21. That was all for chapter 21. Once again, I'm so sorry that I like didn't stop it when I was going to get a tissue. Like I'm looking forward to see what my face did. Like, did it just go slack and then like stop it? Like, what did I do? So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I can't really edit these videos, so I'm shit out of luck there. But yeah, I'll get better next time.